Cool. Well, let's just dive right in. I'll add all the intro and stuff on afterwards after
Sure.
I kind of know what avenues we went down. So,
Great.
cool. Let's start off by getting your story. Why don't you tell me a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. And thanks very much for having me on the podcast. It's going to be fun. I feel I've been an entrepreneur for my whole life, like the classic lemonade stands and learning those hard stories about cost of goods sold when your mom asks you for like the $10 back, and the whole baseball card scene, which is great for an up and coming entrepreneur. But I feel like it's always in my blood. I feel like I've just always had that sort of DNA. I took more of a traditional route and went and got an MBA, and then came out of that and just dove right into the startup world. It was the tail end, unfortunately, of the dot-com era. The front end would have been a lot more lucrative, but just started working at startups that I founded for basically the next 15 years. And what I tried to do was find startups in areas that I enjoyed and had fun. So I was playing a lot of poker, and I started a business in the poker industry. I was getting into cooking, and especially like TV cooking and reality TV cooking.
Mm-hmm.
So I did something in that space. And I guess that's sort of like my life hack on if you can figure out ways to work on the things you like. It's actually a whole lot of fun. And just, I've probably worked with 36 startups in the last 10 years. With a company now called Borrowell, which, as I was explaining, is like a Canadian version of Lending Club, but probably 7 years ago, before, your market is much more developed than ours. And just as head of growth, just focusing on customer acquisition for our startup Borrowell, providing alternate ways for people to borrow money in Canada.
Cool. So what was your first sort of startup? What was the first kind of business thing that you got into?
Well, the two dot-com bubble companies were really interesting. They were way ahead of their time. Probably not worth describing the story, but the timing wasn't right on them. Mm-hmm. Then through a weird turn of events, I became the director of marketing for the Toronto Argonauts, which is a football team in the Canadian Football League. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, the oldest professional football team in North America. So the oldest professional sports team in North America, which is quite remarkable. And then on a trip to Vegas, where all great things start, a friend and I had this idea to create these poker fantasy camps where people can pay a lot of money to come down to Vegas for a weekend and learn to play poker from the pros that they watch on TV. We figured, if you could do baseball fantasy camp and hockey fantasy camp, poker's even better because A, you've got the lifestyle side to it, so you get to come down and play in tournaments and go to clubs and stuff that you wouldn't be able to do on your own. But secondly, on any given hand of poker, you could beat the pro. You could beat him in a tournament, which unlike baseball, you're not going to hit his fastball or whatever. So we made a list of who we thought were the 3 top poker players in the space, and we figured out how to get their phone numbers and called, and the number one guy said he was interested, and one thing led to another, and we started doing his poker camp at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas when poker was really, really booming in America. Later on in the story, Harrah's Entertainment, a huge casino company, purchased the World Series of Poker by buying the Horseshoe in downtown Vegas where it was based, selling the hotel and keeping the property, the World Series of Poker. And they asked us if we wanted to basically do what we're doing but under their brand. And we did, and we created what's called the World Series of Poker Academy. So it was kind of a brand extension to the World Series of Poker. But what that did was it gave us them as a marketing partner, which kicked ass. Mm-hmm. It gave us 36 casinos in North America that could be potential hosts for the event. And it made us not have to focus on the one poker pro. His name was Phil Hellmuth. This allowed us to focus on our criteria was if you've won a World Series of Poker bracelet, and there's 55 of them a year, you could teach for us. So every year they were pumping out new heroes that we could then hire to teach. The long and the short of that is don't have me over to your poker game. I've become pretty good because I've had one-on-one attention from probably like 30 of the top 50 poker players ever. I just wish I had the bankroll to support the skill, but I don't. So I play really low limits and everyone beats me. But
Nice. So I was flipping through your LinkedIn page too, and I saw something about Top Chef. Were you involved in Top Chef in some way?
So a similar brand extension. I called up. Actually, it's more of an interesting story. So I went to NBC Universal at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York, and I went on the carpet and said, "Hey guys, I want to do what I'm doing with poker with you guys. So instead of paying $3,000 to come to Vegas and play poker, let's pay $3,000 to come to New York, learn to cook from the Top Chef contestants, and get to participate in their own Top Chef, where they're the contestant and the chefs were the judge. The lady looked at me and she was like, "Dude, this is 2008 in New York. No one's giving you $3,000." And she might have been right, but had the idea on the spot, not wanting to waste sort of the plane ticket and the opportunity. I was talking to a company in Vegas about doing a virtual version of the poker school. So instead of spending $2,000, you spend $20 a month, and there's interactive content. So with that in the back of my head, I was like, well, what do you guys think about creating a virtual school based on Top Chef? So they liked that idea. One thing led to another. We did a deal. We recorded 60 hours of like bespoke cooking culinary content based on like, a real culinary school curriculum. We launched it on the web, on iPad, on iPhone, DVD, like you name it. Sold it through Groupon. It featured 11 of the past like contestants from the show. So that was a really cool project. Another sort of brand extension of a big brand.
Oh, I love that.
The timing really sucked. I mean, when I was lying in bed and watching Top Chef, it was on for 4 months. What am I talking about? You can cut that if you want to. It was on for 4 months, and then it was off for 8 months. So the fans of the show literally had nothing to do. By the time we had finished production on all the culinary videos, they had 4 different versions of the show, and there was always brand new Top Chef every week available. Top Chef Masters, Top Chef All-Stars, Top Chef Just Desserts. And not only that, the internet video content was becoming really important. So all of a sudden, all the networks started producing video content for their network sites that was free. And here we were charging like $100. How dare we, charge money for content? So the timing was really interesting. It was one of the many lessons I've got in my entrepreneurial career that, they say if you have to choose between like a good idea and a good team, take the good team. But I would take it one step further and say if you had to choose between a good team and good timing, I would take good timing, because I feel like that's really the key.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea that you went and you found these established brands. You found these established followings, and then you figured out a way to extend their brand and, generate another income for them and for you off of extending the brand. Now, is there any sort of like advice or tips or anything that you could give people about like if they wanted to go and try to approach a company like that? Do you have any sort of advice for them?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the topics I speak about and I've written about. I don't know if you did good research or it's just a really good question, but I talk about how to do partnerships with really big brands when you have zero leverage. And when you do come in as a startup, you have no leverage. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that you can do to sort of give yourself the best chance. If the brand has an existing licensing department, you're 9/10 of the way there, because at least they know about taking the brand and doing it for other things. And a lot of times a small advance up front could overcome the fact that you're newer. There's other times, like on the World Series of Poker business, I was up against Clear Channel, who wanted to do it. Apparently, I don't know if they were just saying that to like negotiate against me, but like. So to me, at that point, it was like, well, what can a startup do that Clear Channel can't? And focus on sort of the passion and the focus and the full-timeness and, all that kind of stuff, and that we're not going to let it fail, and it's not just another property. I think you have to be confident. If you can't sell, you need to find someone who can. I see it all the time in like the tech startup space. You've got engineers who couldn't sell you a glass of water if you were dying of thirst, and they go up in front of these like vulture VCs, and like they're not going to get any money from them. So be self-aware enough to know that like if you don't have a pretty good track record of selling stuff, get someone who can, because you're going to need that person. You got to figure out what their needs are, like understanding what's important to them at that very moment and figuring out how to position what you're bringing to them is very important. You got to be persistent. When Phil Hellmuth said, yeah, I'd love to do fantasy camps because he's got a huge ego, why wouldn't he? He sent me to his agent, and the poker players had agents then, and it took me 3 or 4 months of having him say no, to where I finally was like, look, man, you got to just pick up your phone and call your client, because he's really into doing it, and I don't know why you keep telling me no, and like you have to be really tenacious. Mm-hmm. I don't typically take no for an answer. I just try another approach. Because it's all about putting something in the context of like what's really important. If they're $1 million behind budget, tell them how they can get the $1 million.
Right.
If they're trying to develop an online strategy, tell them how you can help them develop an online strategy. You got to sort of position it not from how you want it, but from how they want it.
Yeah.
And just pick up the phone. I mean, I talk about this all the time. Like most people think so many people are picking up the phone that they don't even bother. And there's the guy just sitting there with no one calling him. I asked someone to be on my advisory board once, and I figured it was a long shot. And he told me, "Hey, that's really cool. No one's ever asked me before." I was like, "What?" So a lot of success I've had in my career has just come from picking up the phone. I try to call on Fridays. I feel people are in a good mood on Friday because they got the weekend coming up and they'd love to finish the week on a high note. And they might be more willing to let themselves dream about something that's out of the box more than they would like the doldrums of a Wednesday.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So kind of the big sort of takeaway there is A, just get out of your comfort zone and be willing to try, be willing to call them, because most people won't just call them. And B, figure out what's in it for them, figure out what you could kind of offer them, how you can help them get to their goal. And those are kind of probably the two biggest key elements there.
Yeah. I'm an introverted networker. I don't like going to events. I get invited to a gazillion. I really don't like going to them. But like my mom's words ring in my ear from like back when I was a kid. She said, you're not going to get hit by a bus unless you cross the road. So I think about that a lot. I think about like, I got to still keep crossing these roads.
Yeah. So how did you get from there to where you're at now, the head of growth at Borrowell?
Borrowell, yeah. Very circuitous. Tons of businesses, tons of consulting. Doing the traditional entrepreneurial other investors. They were looking for a head of growth and or a head of marketing, and basically what I love about Borrowell is they'll not hire someone for 6 months and do the work themselves if they can't find the right person. And they were really searching for sort of the right person and the right fit. And I guess it just started like a date, and we started liking each other more, and then one thing led to the other, to the next, and here I am. So it's been about 7 months, and it's been crazy exciting.
So as head of growth, what kind of things do you do there?
So I'm focused on user acquisition, so finding Canadians who want to take a loan from us instead of their bank. We have a very oligopolistic bank system in Canada. In the States, you guys have 7,000 banks, of which the top 5 have, forgive me if this number's off by a little, but like 35% of the market share, 30% of the market share. In Canada, we have 29 banks, and the top 5 have 85% of the market share. And at the same time, we have the highest per capita banking profits of any country in the world. So we've got these 5 companies splitting up just gazillions, literally, dollars. and now under the fintech revolution, which is very big in the States with Lending Club and Prosper, but developing in Canada, companies like ours are going after the big banking institutions by giving consumers a much more convenient and easy way to do things. And in our case, it's really simple. Like the banks want you to come into their branch 2 or 3 times to do what we can do in 60 seconds online. And you can have your loan funded in 24 hours, and we do it remotely, and you sign the papers remotely. So it's just a very modern way to do something. And it's the low-hanging fruit because the banks really, the branch system is not set up to be an efficient way to distribute $35,000 unsecured personal loans. It's set up to distribute $700,000 mortgages. So the problem the banks have is that all these fintech companies are basically pecking away at the lowest hanging fruit and unbundling the banks. I don't have to tell you guys this, like your market's literally 7 or 8 years more advanced than ours is in Canada. But in Canada, we're one of only 2 or 3 of these online lenders that are sort of going after the banks. So it's really exciting, and the regulations changing, real time, and it's a lot of fun. So as head of growth, user acquisition, product. So, I make sure that all the learnings we're getting through marketing are getting back to the product, because we have an interesting product. We have a product, the website and the user experience is part of our product, but our underwriting algorithm that makes an instant determination whether we're willing to give you 35 grand or not, let's say, is also like a huge part of our product. And I have a very interesting growth challenge. I would even suggest a unique growth challenge that the investors that we talk to want to see a huge upward growth curve. So, growing customers month over month. They want to see you decreasing your cost of getting them at the same time, which often has opposite effects. Like those two things often work. If I needed to get more customers but didn't care how much it cost to get them, that's easy. If I needed to get the cost down but it was okay if I only got 2 of them, that's easy. To get those curves going at the same time is challenging. And to make it more challenging, we have a very strict underwriting algorithm because we target prime and above customers, not the subprimes that the a lot of the online lenders go for. So our underwriting algorithm is kicking away a lot of my leads. And we have to get better at figuring out how to target good credit Canadians online without having a lot of the tools that you guys have. We actually have privacy laws in Canada. So because of that, we just don't have the same pre-approved tools. We can't get the same data from the credit bureaus. That we can't do the same type of direct mail offers that's been the fuel for the American ones. So we really have to come in every day and get smarter at figuring out how to target good credit Canadians online, when the fact of the matter is that most of the people looking actively for loans online are not good credit.
Gotcha.
Typically.
Cool. So I want to shift gears a little bit here. Let's talk about personal branding a little bit. First of all, how important do you think it is to build a personal brand for an individual?
So I think it depends what you want to do. I think, I've been a lifelong learner. I go to conferences. I go to I'm members of organizations that have educational events. I've seen every type of expert speaker you could think of. And I have a great respect for the good ones. And if that's sort of the life you want to do, sort of consulting, entrepreneurial speaking, I think it's a must. I think in 2016, I almost said 15, you don't have an option. You have to become a thought leader. But I think people who want to be top employees, people who want to start their own companies, also have a tremendous opportunity to brand themselves personally, so that when you make the final five for a job and they can go and dig into a bit of your sort of library, they could really get to see the side of you that you want to project, live in the process. And I think that's invaluable. I can't think of anything more valuable. So I read 2 books that really turned my head around on personal branding, even though it's something I had thought about before. One was James Altucher's Choose Yourself, which is like my best book recommendation for anyone who hasn't read it.
It's funny because that book, just a side topic, I've probably recommended that book to more people in the last 6 months than any other book.
I know you and I got to work on an affiliate code or something and start earning on it. But I just see eye to eye with him. I don't know him personally, but I just like a lot of the stuff he talks about. And even when it's like more minimalist than I'm willing to go, I really think it's well thought out and kind of like a logical way to live life. The other one that's similar was called The Startup of You by Reid Hoffman and Ben Casnocha. And I read that one, maybe it was the context. I read it like lying on a blanket in Golden Gate Park on a beautiful sunny day when I was down in San Francisco for a conference, so it was great. But it made a lot of sense. But I guess the gist of both of these things is like everything you need to do to rebrand yourself is in your control and doesn't rely on anyone else knighting you as the person to do it. And once you start doing it and you see the result, and the result comes like crazy fast, opportunities, experiences, new people you meet as a result, you're just like, wow, the more of this I do, the more amazing stuff might come back. It might not, there's no guarantee. And like I said, I just think it's completely within people's control. The other aha moment I had, which was sort of like brought it all full circle, was I was at a conference in Boston in 2014 called Inbound. It's put on by HubSpot. It's one of my favorite conferences. I leave there learning just so much. And one of the speakers that I chose, there's 400 speakers, so you have to like pick and choose the ones you want to go to, was talking about like where marketing's going. And that's really, I don't even know why I went to that one. I usually go to the more tactical ones where I could learn like a skill or a tool. But I went to this one, and what I heard blew my mind. In terms of where marketing was heading. I won't bore you with all the details, but they said by 2018, companies are going to spend more on marketing technology than information technology. So that's like goodbye SAP, hello HubSpot. And that was like mind-blowing. That some of the best minds in IT are leaving IT for marketing. Like 3 years ago, that would have been like you would have been a pariah in your community if you were a good tech person or a developer and you went to marketing, and now these are leaving. Stats like that. Then I went and saw a speech by the VP of marketing for Staples.com. I had a startup in the school supply business right then at that time, so it was like the perfect match in heaven. But she said like she's looking for this person that doesn't exist, who could be her right-hand person, who's good with data and technology and creative and thinks differently. And because she's sick of like having her initiatives in queue with IT. And I was thinking, if she has this problem, then everyone has this problem, because money is not a problem. So a combination of realizing that I didn't need to wait for anyone to choose me and looking 2 years down the road and figuring out what's going to be needed there and not what's needed now, which is going to be obsolete by the time you put in the effort and the work, was really key. Mm-hmm. So I started asking myself, what would I want my job to look like? Along comes this topic, this title, growth hacker, which I don't particularly like, but it created sort of a name for this gap, which is very valuable. Without the name, people would know they were missing something, but they wouldn't know what. So I think about it as more of growth marketing, which is, typically startups, but not always. All, revenue focused, all profit focused, all data driven, creative, looking for untapped channels, all that kind of stuff. So I knew that was the vein, and all sort of the work that I did, and it is a ton of work. You can't fake it. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't know your stuff, it's not going to work. Take 3 or 6 months, learn the stuff, and then do it. If you do it, it's not going to, I've never seen anyone fake their way into it. I've seen people that fake their way into one really good presentation and then spin it every which way till Sunday to put it into different formats. Uh-huh. But I've never seen anyone who doesn't have really good knowledge and can't really answer real-time questions.
Right.
So at that point along came the book, and the book focused me to do a ton of research on growth hacking. So I was learning as I went. So I got to do that 3 to 6 months, probably the last 3 months researching the book and getting to learn at the same time. And then all those things came together, and I started blogging, I started doing more podcasts, I started mentoring, looking for accelerators and stuff, and more speaking and more volunteering, and just getting out there. And almost immediately, just interesting opportunities and experiences started popping up. And it just leaves you with the feeling that the more good content you put out, the more cool things that can happen. And that that doesn't necessarily mean $1 million contracts, but just really cool experiences.
Yeah, very cool. So that's actually a pretty good segue over to the book. So the book is called The Growth Hacker's Guide to the Galaxy, and you launched that through a Kickstarter campaign. And I do actually want to get into the process of creating the book, but first, can you explain a little bit about what growth hacking is, what that term means? You kind of briefly touched on it a second ago, but there might be some people not quite as savvy to that term that are listening.
Sure. So traditional marketing looks at marketing in a different way. They make decisions based off past data. They do a lot of different things. They throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And they do something we call spray and pray marketing, where they just buy a lot of stuff and hope some of it works. They usually aren't very good at attributing, where the customer's coming from. And they typically work in channels where their competitors work, so they're not going to get much of a competitive advantage against the competitor. In fact, they may get none. If everyone buys the same Google keyword, the only one who gets rich is Google. Mm-hmm. If everyone buys the same Facebook person, same thing for Mr. Zuckerberg. So, a growth marketer combines a bunch of different things. I think most importantly, they're always focused on the bottom line. So by using data and good attribution, they're taking their best estimates of what really is moving the needle. And after trying a whole bunch of different things, you can rank them by cost per acquisition and just focus on the ones that are the cheapest. They focus on data, so a tremendous amount of data knowledge in terms of looking to figure out what really is working. Because sometimes the stuff that looks like it's working on the surface isn't really what's making the difference. And sometimes it's more complex correlations that are actually causing the result that you're witnessing. Sometimes your attribution model could be so bad that what you think is 1, 2, 3 is actually 3, 2, 1, and you're allocating really improperly. So data is super important. And then it's the same with creativity, because that's what's going to help you find the new opportunities, the new messaging within those opportunities. So it's a new look at marketing that combines sort of technical automation, data science, and experimentation. Now, I think when Sean Ellis invented the term growth hacking, I think the hacking he was referring to was not computer hacking, right. It was hacking the process of growth. So if this is what 3 years growth looks like for a traditional company, how do I do that in 9 months so I can raise $20 million of Series A venture capital and really make this thing big fast? So I think what they're hacking is that growth curve and trying to figure out ways to on their budget, get that growth curve faster, bigger, stronger.
Right.
So I think it's the process of growth that's being hacked. I prefer, like I said, the term growth marketing, but I'm not a stickler.
Yeah. So, I mean, like a traditional marketing would be like, when you say like kind of like the spray and pray kind of marketing, you're talking like billboards, TV commercials, radio ads, that kind of stuff. they all sort of build the brand and drive people to your site, but you have no idea who came in as a result of your TV commercial versus your billboard versus your radio, where a growth hacker might be like really dialing into your metrics of, these people are coming in from Facebook advertising or Google advertising or Twitter advertising or, viral sort of marketing strategies, and really analyzing that data and ramping up, scaling up what's working and cutting out what doesn't.
Well, that's really the first principles of it. It gets much deeper. I mean, a traditional company may do their budget a year in advance, and may do their media buying, 3 months, 6 months in advance, and their creative 6 months in advance. I mean, we're testing everything on a weekly or bi-weekly schedule based on, how many clicks we need to prove or disprove our hypotheses. We have a great ad agency called Brand Engineering that we work with, plug to Brand Engineering, and when they send me creative, we just get it on Facebook and see what the market tells us it likes the best. And then we tweak within it, and we tweak headlines, and, it's just, we have a budget, and a portion of that budget, maybe the big portion of that budget, goes to what we call the champion, the campaign we've been nurturing for months and months and getting better and better and better. And then we have an experimental budget, which is sort of our R&D budget, where we're trying completely different things. So on one hand, we're optimizing, trying to get 1% better a week, which compounds greatly over time. On the other thing, we're looking for something that might drop our cost per acquisition by a factor of 3 or 4 and really make a difference. And we're looking at things every day, and like I said, weekly or bi-weekly decisions, and we're not buying anything for serious dollars until we know it works. And we have a culture and a rhythm of experimentation that forces us to let the data speak. And I just don't think traditional marketers can do that. And it's not their fault. It's not that they're not smart enough. I just don't think they're in a culture that would allow them to be that responsive.
Right.
One of the problems I had dealing with some of those large companies we talked about before, at that time I had this hypothesis that the ultimate mix was this big, huge company with a brand and this really fleet startup. But over time, I started to get a little more jaded and think maybe you slow down to the slowest, denominator. But yeah, I think it's a different mindset, a different way of looking at marketing, and it's really born out of the fact that it's born out of bootstrap. We don't have millions of dollars to waste. We don't have, the opportunity to be wrong 4 times. So, we really need a good proof of concept that we're going to make more than the dollar we spend back before we invest significantly.
Gotcha. So what are some good examples of some good growth hacks? Maybe some examples of some bigger companies that kind of use the growth hacking to get there, and maybe a few of your own little favorite sort of tricks.
Well, there's definitely some classic ones, and I'd say if you're a seasoned growth hack, you might roll your eyes when I say them. But if you don't know that space as well, you'd think, oh, okay, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'll start with some of those. Dropbox is a classic example. Dropbox is cloud file storage. Every time you invited someone and they created an account, you got more storage.
Right.
So I don't have the stats in front of me, but they're very rich because they've figured out how to get their customers to spread the word. And that made a lot of sense because they were giving you the actual product. It was just more of it. And they sized the free accounts to an amount where you were going to need more of it at the proper time and incentivized it and made it really easy to do that. So that was really cool. More recently, Uber had a big growth hack that now pretty much all of the on-demand services are following. But the idea of putting your cost per acquisition, so the amount of money that you would spend to acquire a customer, and giving it to them as like $20 off your first ride, $25 off your first meal. The interesting thing about that is I would venture that maybe they were spending $80 offline. That could be way low. It could be $300. But just to paint the picture, maybe they were spending $80 offline to acquire a customer, but $20 if you took their $20 and just applied it to your first ride. Plus, you got the benefit of that. Now they knew how the service worked. Now they had their credit card hooked up. Now they had it on their phone. So that's sort of been like a huge growth hack for the on-demand guys that pretty much everyone does right now, because all you're doing is taking your acceptable cost per acquisition, cutting it in 3 or 4, and saying, here, take that money instead. So that's a great move. HubSpot, 7 or 8 years ago, they did something great. I always lean towards the growth hacks that are product driven. we call it engineering as marketing, where you can build something into the product itself that gets it to spread, because your ROI on that could be infinite and your competitive advantage could be long-term. So what they did was they came up with something called Website Marketing Grader. What Website Marketing Grader was a website where you typed in your website's URL and your email address, and they'd send you a report on what you were doing good and bad for inbound SEO, that kind of stuff. And they also just happen to be the solution. If you're doing it bad, come talk to us because we'll help you do it good. But they were getting 40,000 leads a month off Website Marketing Grader. Like, how would you like to start a startup with 40,000 leads a month based on a little bit of a tool? That was basically marketing anyway, because they created the entire inbound movement and then was there to service it. So they're an amazing success story.
Yeah. One of the old school ones that when I first kind of heard the term growth hacking, and I don't know if you would consider it a growth hack or not, but one that I remember hearing was I think it was Hotmail, where at the bottom of every single email it said this email was delivered to you free by Hotmail, and so everybody who received an email through Hotmail saw that little link and signed up for a Hotmail account kind of thing. Yeah,
that's classic. That's totally classic. And I'm not a growth hack snob. I mean, the move either got you customers cheaper or did not get you customers cheaper. It doesn't need to be the sexiest thing in the world. I mean, it just needs to work. Did it achieve your advantage? Are you measuring it correctly? Is it scalable? Like, is it a one-time thing, like getting on the front page of USA Today? Or is this something that, like, someone could say, hey, if I give you $100 million, could you make $500 million with it? And you say, yeah, like, it could scale that big. So I'm not a growth hack snob. I don't turn my nose up at ones. Like, if it worked, man, more power to you.
Now, are there any sort of growth hacks that maybe you mention in the book that are kind of lesser known, but you think more people should be kind of trying to utilize?
Let me just take 2 minutes and give you a little idea about the background of the book, because it's interesting, and then I'll tell you, because the answer is yes, there's some really interesting things. In fact, there's 100 growth hacks in the book, which are all basically like, here's the objective, here's what you're trying to do, here's who we used to do it, here's the degree of difficulty, here's how much it's going to cost you, here are the steps, and here's a pro tip that will help you sort of take it to the next level. So it's very actionable. People are like, we only want to talk about your book if it's actionable. I was like, it's basically, is a recipe book, a cookbook actionable? Right, like, it's as actionable as that. So it started off as a blog post that targeted, it was 65 growth hacks targeting SaaS marketers, software as a service marketers. And it was really awesome. It was 35,000 words that my co-author in New Zealand, Mark Hayes, put on his digital agency's website. And I said, hey, I have an idea to take this piece of work and turn it into a book that targets all startup and digital marketers, can be interesting to everyone, is bigger, and involves some case studies where we talk to super high growth companies and see, would you be interested in doing that? And he said yes. About a week later, the blog post, which was called The Ultimate Growth Hackers Sourcebook, got picked up by 3 or 4 really big influencers, and all of a sudden we had 50,000 views. And Moz.com and inbound.org and I think Forbes.com did a little something on it. And, some of the big influencers like Sean Ellis and Lincoln Murphy commented that it was great. So that sort of gave us the confidence that, hey, yeah, let's try to do something more with it. So the problem was, like, we had this hot piece of content, but the book was going to take ages to put out, and people would be so over it by then. How do we bridge it? And the idea to bridge it was the Kickstarter. So help us turn it from this blog post into this amazing book. And around the same time, we found this amazing publisher called Insurgent Publishing, and they had just done Dan Norris's book, The 7-Day Startup, and we decided to work with him. He started his publishing company when he was enlisted in one of the overseas Gulf Wars, and really cool. He started the publishing company while he was there. So he was a great help in terms of helping us get the book formatted and helping us with the Kickstarter. And the Kickstarter was really difficult. They look a lot easier than they are. It's really easy to get people to like have a splash at the beginning, but to sustain it for 30 or 60 days is like really, really hard. But we were able to get it funded, which really gave us the ability to put a little more, love and TLC into it and have a better cover, and it's going to be just a nicer product. And it's going to come out later this month, and it's got 100 growth hacks organized over 3 sort of life cycle phases of business. So the first is called product market fit, where you're ultimately trying to figure out if anyone wants what you're making other than yourself. And the second one's called transitioning to growth, which is when you're going to experiment a million things and try to find something that you could turn into this predictable, repeatable, scalable marketing engine. And the third one's called growth. When you've found it, now you have to pump it. So the 100 growth hacks. Oh, and a bonus section on personal productivity, where we give 10 growth hacks on ways that you could sort of become more productive.
Gotcha.
And then, we decided we wanted to put these case studies in of companies where we wanted to really sort of unpack their stories and hear what they had to do. The original plan was to do them through secondary research through the web. When the thing went viral and we had a bit of a story to tell, we started calling people up and asking them if they'd be interviewed for a case study, and like 2 out of 3 said yes. Every 2 out of 3 said yes. So that was an amazing, talking about personal branding, that was amazing for me because I got to spend an hour with these guys, ask them whatever questions I wanted, and I got to know them. I mean, I play cards with some of them now. I hang out with some of them now. It's awesome. So the type of companies like Shopify, interviewed their CMO who took them from 9,000 stores to wherever they are now, probably close to 300,000.
Right.
I talked to the CMO of Zenefits, who was the number 2 there when they started. They raised $500 million very recently. Frank and Oak, which is an online clothing company. Well, they're now online and offline. I talked to their founder. Rob Walling from Drip, which is an email marketing company. I'm forgetting a zillion of them, but just these awesome stories that we got to tell our readers, where instead of having our take on someone else's content, we got to ask our own questions. My favorite one was Sidekick by HubSpot. We interviewed the head of growth there, who was basically working within HubSpot Labs to create the Sidekick product. And then figure out what the theme of each of these case studies were and drill down into the theme. So sometimes I came in with a theme. With Zenefits, I knew they grew through adding more SDRs. They grew 200 to 400 SDRs. So I knew for them it was scaling people and bodies and training and hiring. When it came to Frank and Oak, I really wanted to know how they got all those people to sign up ahead of time and how they created the scarcity and basically didn't have to market the first 6 months. And then other times, it was 25 minutes into the interview where we figured out what the theme was and sort of had to dig in from there. But that was an awesome experience, and it was great.
Yeah, that's cool. So what would be a couple that stand out sort of hacks stories that you could share?
I tend to like the stories better than the hacks because I don't believe that every company can take every hack and be successful.
Right.
Part of being a good growth hacker is sitting down and figuring out what needs to be done. What's the objective? What's going to get you to that objective? But there were some of the themes that repeated over and over. I give a talk called 10 of the themes I learned interviewing these amazing people. And a couple things just kept jumping out over and over that I think are interesting. And the first one was this idea of product market fit, and figuring out who your exact audience was, where you were going to reach them, and what messaging you could say that would really appeal to them. So Drip had a value Matt Epstein from Zenefits, he spent 3 months of his life just A/B testing messaging. So he had all these email addresses, he broke them into groups, he sent them one together and saw which ones resulted. Then once there was a winner, he would do it again, and he did that for 3 months. So think about the feel he would have for his messaging at the end of that period. Ethan Song from Frank and Oak figured that their value proposition was premium threads for under $50. That was their tagline. They figured out who their customer was, they got that message in front of them, mainly on Facebook, and they were like, hell yeah, I want premium threads for under $50. I've been searching for that all my life. Rob Walling at Drip had a value proposition, lightweight email automation that doesn't suck. And the reason that was cool was because everyone wanted it lightweight, but every time they tried something that was lightweight, it sucked. And the Constant Contacts of the world, which are great software, are pretty heavy for a light user. So he got that in front of SMB marketers, and they were all like, hell yeah, I'll try that. So the aha moment there was you can test for product market fit. If you can't put 5 or 7 words in front of the right people who you've identified as the right people and elicit some sort of a response, you don't have product market fit, and you're going to waste every dollar you try to growth hack, because it's only once you're saying something that they want to hear that you can grow.
Gotcha.
So that was just oh yeah. And I could think back to a bunch of clients where my instinct told me they weren't ready to do what I needed to do with them, but they were anxious, like all of us entrepreneurs are. And the next thing you know, the result isn't there, and it's because they didn't know what about their product was important to their customer.
Gotcha.
So it took me till like 40 to figure that out, but I got there.
All right, so there's kind of one last little rabbit hole I want to go down with you, and that's about how you actually got the book created. So I know it started as a big giant mega blog post, right? And then you funded it on Kickstarter. What's kind of the rest of the story in there to actually get this book produced?
Well, to me, it starts with a vision. I have this idea for something, and I figure out what that looks like. And I need to start with like a really detailed outline. I can't just sit down and write. I need to know what I'm writing at that moment, how it fits in with the bigger picture. I don't think I'm a writer by nature. And although I can write, I guess most writers promoting their books don't say they're not writers by nature. But my point is, like, I need that sort of business structure to it. I need the objective and the structure to do it. So we put together that structure, and that really came from who's the book going to be for and what's the best way to teach them what we need to teach them. For me, like when I'm looking at a book in the bookstore on Amazon, I go to the table of contents first, and I need to understand sort of how they plan on teaching me the topics in addition to what topics they're teaching me. So we got that layout done, and it ended up like we probably removed half of the 60 growth hacks that he did and wrote 70 from scratch, because a lot of them ended up being too specific for SaaS marketers. Or some of them are out of date because this stuff moves pretty quickly. Twitter changes one API, and all of a sudden your Twitter growth hack is like down the garbage and you need a new one. So we came up with that. Mark was pretty burnt out from writing the first 35,000 words, so I grabbed the reins from there, and we did a ton of research to figure out, like, for those stages of companies, what would be finding interesting or useful. It's kind of like my own little playbook. At one point, I actually felt like, is this a good idea to put all this stuff out? Like, I know my competitors are going to read it, but like it moves so quickly that at some point the stuff turns from growth hack to table stakes. It's not that you shouldn't be doing it anymore. It's just that you're not going to have that edge you once had, right?
Right.
So volume 2 will have the new edge.
So with the actual Kickstarter campaign, how did you get the traction with it? Because I know you said that it was you kind of found it a little bit easier in the beginning to get some initial traction, but then it was hard to keep that traction. What did you do to get that traction, to get people really going on that?
Well, once the blog post started going viral, we started collecting email addresses. And as far as I'm concerned, email addresses are the key to Kickstarter, to any crowdfunding platform. I helped my friend who has a Canadian rock band. They've been around for probably 25 years, and this was their 13th album, so they had a pretty decent base. But we did it with a company called Pledge Music, which is owned by Universal Music, and the guy there was like, I'll tell you how much you're going to make. It's your list size multiplied by the conversion rate that we know because we've done enough of these, multiplied by your average cart size, which we know because we've done enough of them. I was like, oh, dude, you're full of it. Like, we've got engaged fans. And like, sure enough, he was pretty close.
Yeah.
So it really is a numbers game. So like 6 months before I was starting a Kickstarter, I would put in a plan to sort of figure out how many email addresses I'm going to need to hit my goal based on a conversion rate and a $60 average purchase, and reverse engineer it. Basically, everything I'm doing now, I'm trying to reverse engineer from where we need to go. Where do you need to end up and why? The why is really important. I need to get this because if I get this, the investors are going to give me the money to go to the next step. Great. That's what we need to do. This is how much money we have. How do we get from there to here? And you sort of work it backwards. You do the same thing with Kickstarter, and it all ends up like, what's your Facebook reach? Which isn't even great because you got to pay to access it. Your Twitter reach, which is better, but it's a little bit of a fart in the wind, if you don't mind me saying. The velocity. Or email, which is still king for this kind of stuff. So we started collecting email addresses when the blog was doing well, and that obviously helped us when it came time. There's all your friends and family. I emailed 900 people. Your own, you'll determine how often and how many people you're willing to email, but I tried not to be obnoxious about it. But all that stuff sort of, we really want to get 25% funded in the first 24 hours, because if that happens, we're going to get like all the women and all the money. It doesn't. It is important, but it doesn't guarantee you success. So you hit that mark, and then it's like, okay, I have 29 and a half days to figure out a way to like keep the momentum going and get people on the cusp to buy, and you don't have that splash anymore. You get it again when you're sort of close to the end. There's 24 hours left to do it. So the people who like wanted to do it but didn't will come in. It's really hard to hold the momentum. With the Harem Scarum album that we did on Pledge Music, the album was called 13. And we had this awful idea to do this thing we called 13 Weeks to 13, which every week of a 13-week campaign, which is 4 campaigns too long, we were going to do a video update. I think it was cool because we had the legs and the format to stay, up to date every week, but the amount of work and the length of time was crazy. So you have to have a plan on how you're going to keep people interested.
Gotcha. So if you were to do that Kickstarter again, what would you do differently?
If I was going to do it again, I'd be really picky on what product I would do it with. I now believe that only certain types of products it makes sense for. I think it's interesting for digital products because the cost of goods allows you to actually make money on the pledges, whereas if you're spending 60% of the cost, which ends up being 80 because you messed up your postage calculations, then you have to sell 5 times as more things to make the same money, which just sounds like a bad idea to me. If you're shipping off hats and sweaters and physical stuff. Digital is also good because let's give them access to us, webinars. We have a private Slack channel that people can ask us questions on, stuff like that. But yeah, I think it comes down to just having a huge list, access to a huge list.
Awesome.
And working with Tom at Insurgent Publishing was huge because he had good templates and formulas. He knew what should be there. He helped us put the graphics together. And a lot of times, we'd call a provider of a product we really like let's say animated videos, and say, hey, if we include you as a hack in the book on animated videos, will you give us an animated video for the Kickstarter? And they'd say, sure, let's do it. Yeah. And we would just trade that off. And, we wouldn't do that with someone we weren't going to recommend because that's just stupid. But, if it was a company that, we're working with in our day job anyway, why not? So the Kickstarter came together, and yeah, it's just really, really hard. I think products that demonstrate really well are good for Kickstarter. Products that you watch it and it blows your mind. So when I think back, I think about a $500 e-bike I saw that could go on any, that's an amazing product at an amazing price. I almost bought it. I probably should have. I saw a drone that you throw up in the air and it follows this thing on your wrist as you're skiing and kayaking. That's cool as shit. Put that on Kickstarter. You want as many people to see it. Because the more people who see it are going to buy it. The more rich people who drive Teslas are going to buy Teslas. So what you need to do is you got to get a lot of rich people test driving Teslas, right? So that's the kind of product. I wonder in the back of my head if we should have done the book on a book-focused crowdfunding site like Publishizer, because I wonder if just book buyers would have been the best to be in front of versus tech guys.
Gotcha.
But anyway, all we wanted was that we weren't trying to raise a crazy amount of money. We just wanted enough that we didn't have to cut corners, that we could have a nice cover, that the book could be laid out well, because that stuff's really important. It seems like it's just gloss, but I think it just adds to the reading experience.
Yeah, and you hit your mark, and the book is coming out later this month in January.
Oh, we're so close. The admin around a book kind of bums me out at the end. You work so hard to get it out, and then you sit around and wait. It's done editing. It's in design. It's as little as a week, as many as 3 from being on Amazon. And we have a whole bunch of stuff to do to fulfill the Kickstarter pledges. Sign physical books. We did these cool T-shirts and stickers and stuff. So we have to do that. And hopefully by the end of January, it's on Kindle and everyone can get it there, or as a PDF through the website, which is growthhackerguide.com.
Now, can people still kind of pre-order it right now? Is it available?
No, we didn't do a pre-order other than the Kickstarter. We decided we were close enough to just wait and get it out. But within a couple weeks, it'll be on Kindle, and there is an email form on the website where if you want to be notified, you can put your email in, and as soon as the book's out, we'll email everyone.
Cool. So typically I would ask, what sort of book recommendations do you have for people? You already mentioned James Altucher's Choose Yourself, and then I think it was The Startup of You. Do you have any others, or would those be kind of your 2 biggest?
No, I'll give you 2 more. I try to read a book a week. I'm not always successful, but I do read a lot of books. For anyone in startup world or thinking of starting their own company, there's a book called Traction by Gabe Weinberg, which is a really awesome way to look at startup marketing. So I recommend that. I think it's the best framework on figuring out where these growth opportunities are going to come from.
Cool. I've got that one on my bookshelf, but I haven't read it yet. So that'll probably be my next one.
You know what's really interesting about that book? The way it's laid out is the first 5 chapters explain the thinking and the process, have amazing quotes from some of the top VCs, who are ultimately the arbiters of traction because they're the ones putting money in what they think are the big movers. And And then the next 19 chapters are the 19 channels that he talks about, and they're all sort of written through an interview with someone who used that channel solely to grow the business huge. So really all you need to read to get started and to sort of like get tuned into the concept is read the first 5, and then I sort of go to the chapter specifically when it's like, oh, I've got I'm working on some social media ads. Let's go see what he recommends in terms of how to test.
Well, that's cool.
There's another good James Altucher one I just read. I may butcher the title, but it was The Wealthy Employee. Wow, that's lame. Sorry. He's got all of his books have been.
It's not Guide to Wealth, is it?
It's one that was targeting people who work at existing companies and not people who are starting their own businesses. So it was really about like how you could become, I guess, an entrepreneur, but more like how you could still be a great entrepreneur and build wealth within a company. And if you're going to transition to a new one, how to do it and all that stuff. So if you search Wealthy and Employee and Altucher, I guarantee it's going to be the first result. Maybe you could add it to the show notes because I'm having a brain fart. But I thought it was really awesome because I read a lot of the entrepreneurial stuff and it's got great advices for entrepreneurs. But I always think in the back of my head, like, if you're like, digital marketing at Walmart, this probably doesn't have a lot of application to you. And he took it and gave it application to people who are working. And I thought that was really awesome because now instead of speaking to like 2% of the market, you could speak to 60 or 70% of the market with some of his ideas. So I thought that was really cool.
Cool. And it's called The Rich Employee.
Yes.
Just looked it up.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll add that to the show notes for sure. And then, so final question: where should we send people from this show? Where can people go find out more about you, about the book? What's their next steps? Sure,
I'll give you a couple. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, so if anyone wants to say hi or ask a question, my Twitter handle is @Jeff_Goldenberg, Goldenberg. The book website is thegrowthhackerguide.com. And I have, or I should say I'm starting my own little blog at jeffgoldenberg.net, where I link to some of the podcasts I've been on, some of the articles, some of the guest posts and stuff like that. So just try to like keep all my stuff in one little playpen, and that's jeffgoldenberg.net. But I love answering questions, and if anyone wants to talk on Twitter, that'd be awesome.
Awesome. Cool. I'll put all that stuff in the show notes, and I appreciate you hanging out with me today and taking the time to share all this.
It was a lot of fun. It was great chatting with you.
Awesome.